The day my son told me to get out of my own house, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him. Really looked at him. And I thought, your mother saw this coming 20 years ago. His name is Garrett? Wait, no. I need to start over in my head. Let me tell you what happened the morning after we buried my wife of 41 years. Her name was June, my wife. The woman who built everything we had, from a kitchen table and a yellow legal pad and sheer, stubborn will. She passed on a Thursday in late October, right when the maples out front were turning that deep red she always loved. She made me promise not to cut them down when she was gone. I told her I'd never cut them down. She smiled like she knew I meant it. I'm Harold. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 32 years building a commercial landscaping company in Central Ohio, Whitmore Property Services, until it had 12 trucks, 40 employees, and contracts with half the office parts between Columbus and Dayton. June was my bookkeeper, my partner, and honestly the only reason we didn't go under in 2009 when everything fell apart for everyone. She renegotiated every single vendor contract herself while I was out trying to keep clients from walking. She sat at that kitchen table for 3 weeks straight with her reading glasses and a calculator, and she saved us. Our son. I'll call him my son because that's what he is, even now. His name is Preston. He's 39. He married a woman named Lacey about 6 years ago, and she is the kind of person who measures a room before deciding if she wants to be in it. She came from money, not working money, not build something money, just money that had always been there, and she'd never had to think about where it came from. Preston started working at Whitmore right out of Ohio State. I was proud of that. I wanted him there. I showed him everything: how to read a commercial bid, how to manage crews, how to handle a client who calls you at 7 in the morning screaming about a sprinkler head. He was good at it, decent instincts. June always said he had my stubbornness and her charm, which was about the most useful combination a person could have in business. But after he married Lacey, something shifted. It was slow at first, little things. He started showing up later, started passing decisions to his operations manager instead of making them himself, started taking long lunches with clients I'd never heard of, coming back smelling like a restaurant I couldn't afford on my first paycheck. I didn't say anything for a long time. He was my son. I wanted to believe it was just the adjustment of being newly married, of building his own life. June saw it differently. She saw it clearly, the way she saw most things clearly. About 2 years before she got sick, she came to me one Sunday evening. We were sitting on the back porch, the one we'd rebuilt together the summer Preston turned 12. She had a glass of sweet tea, and she was quiet for a long time, which meant she was about to say something important. She said, "Harold, I think we need to change the will." I asked her what she meant. She said she'd been watching Preston. Not with judgment. She loved that boy more than anything on this earth. But with clear eyes. She said she was worried about what would happen to me if she went first. She said Lacey was the kind of woman who would find a way to make Preston choose, and Preston was the kind of man who would choose wrong and regret it later when it was too late to fix. I told her she was being too hard on him. She gave me that look she had, the one that meant, "I love you, but you're not seeing this straight." We hired an estate attorney. Her name was Gloria Chin, a sharp woman out of Columbus with 20 years in trust in estate law who didn't waste a single word. June spent 3 sessions with her, most of them without me, because she said I'd argue and slow things down. She wasn't wrong. What they built together I didn't fully understand until the morning after the funeral. We buried June on a Tuesday. Preston and Lacey were there. Lacey cried in that precise, controlled way that makes you wonder if the tears are real. And I decided that was uncharitable of me, and I pushed the thought away. Preston held my arm during the graveside service, and I was grateful for that. I was. That night, people came to the house. Neighbors, old employees, clients who'd known June for decades. Preston and Lacey stayed for about 2 hours, then said they needed to get home to let the dog out. I hugged my son at the door. He said he'd call me tomorrow. He didn't call. He came over 3 days later with Lacey and a man I'd never met who turned out to be their financial advisor, a guy named Chris something, with a slim briefcase and very clean shoes. They sat down in my living room. The living room where June had put up the Christmas tree every single year since 1987, and Preston told me that he and Lacey had been talking, and they felt it would be best if I considered moving somewhere smaller. I said, "I'm sorry?" He said the house was large for one person. He said the upkeep was significant. He said there were some very comfortable senior communities in the area that offered a lot of amenities. I looked at my son. I said, "Preston, your mother has been in the ground for 3 days." Lacey put her hand on Preston's arm, not to stop him, I realized, but to steady him, to keep him going. She said they weren't trying to be insensitive, but they needed to start thinking practically about the estate. The estate. June's will was to be read the following Monday at Gloria Chen's office. Preston and Lacey already knew what was in it, or thought they did. June had told Preston years ago that Whitmore Property Services would pass to him, along with the house and the investment accounts she'd built carefully over 30 years of frugality and good decisions. She'd told him that. She'd wanted him to know he was provided for. What she hadn't told him was what she'd done 2 years ago after that Sunday evening on the back porch. Monday morning, I put on the blue tie June had given me for our 35th anniversary, and I drove to Gloria Chen's office on 5th Avenue in Columbus. Preston and Lacey were already there when I arrived. Lacey was wearing a blazer. She had a notepad. Gloria Chen shook my hand first. She looked at me steadily for a moment, the way someone looks at you when they know something that's about to change everything and they want to make sure you're ready. Then she asked everyone to sit down. She read the will in full. Preston sat up straighter when she got to the part about Whitmore Property Services. His name was there. The company was his. The house came to him as well. The investment portfolio, roughly $890,000 across 3 accounts, went into something called the Whitmore Family Trust. Lacey was already writing on her notepad. Then Gloria Chen kept reading. The trust, she explained, was structured with specific provisions. Preston would receive a quarterly distribution from the trust income, a reasonable amount, enough to supplement but not to replace. However, and here Gloria paused, not for effect, but because she was precise and she wanted to make sure everyone heard this clearly. The trust principal and the management of distributions would be administered by a trustee. The trustee was not Preston. The trustee was not Lacey's financial advisor, Chris. The trustee was me. Furthermore, the trust contained a provision June's attorney described as a caretaking clause. If, at any point, I was removed from the family home without my consent, or if I could demonstrate to the trustee, meaning myself, with documentation that my son had materially neglected my welfare, the trust would be restructured. Preston's distributions would cease. The principal would be liquidated and donated in full to the Central Ohio Humane Society, which June had supported quietly for 15 years, dropping off checks at their front desk every December like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. The room was very quiet. Preston said, "I don't understand." Gloria Chen said, "Would you like me to read that section again?" Lacey said, slowly, "So the money, the investment accounts, Harold controls them?" Gloria said, "I was the trustee, yes." She said it was an irrevocable trust. She said the provisions were legally binding and had been reviewed and notarized and filed properly. She said June had been very thorough. Preston looked at me. His face was doing something complicated. I didn't say anything. I just thought about my wife sitting on that back porch with her glass of sweet tea, knowing exactly what she was doing. When we left the attorney's office, Lacey walked ahead. Preston caught up with me at my car. He said, "Dad, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." I said I didn't think there had been. He said he hadn't meant any disrespect. The other day at the house, he was just trying to think ahead. I said I knew. He said he hoped we could talk more about this, work something out. I said I'd be home if he wanted to call. He did call that evening. And the evening after that. Lacey called once, very formally, to clarify some questions about the distribution schedule. I answered her questions and kept my voice even and thanked her for calling. I could hear her recalibrating on the other end of the line. Preston came to the house the following Saturday alone. No briefcase, no Lacey, no Chris with the clean shoes. He rang the doorbell instead of using his key, which told me something. I let him in and we sat in the kitchen. The same kitchen where his mother had saved the business with a calculator and a legal pad. And he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She knew, didn't she?" I said, "She knew." He put his hands flat on the table. He didn't cry, but it was close. He said, "I'm sorry, Dad. About the other day. About all of it." I thought about June. About 41 years. About red maple trees and Christmas trees and a woman who could see around corners that the rest of us couldn't even find. I told my son that sorry was a start, but starts had to be followed by something. He nodded. He understood that. We're still working on it. Some days are easier than others. He comes by on Sundays now, sometimes with Lacey, sometimes without. Lacey is still learning how to be in a room without measuring at first, and I'm still learning how to leave space for her to try. It's not simple. Families aren't simple. But I still live in my house. The maples out front have gone bare now that it's December. But come spring they'll turn green, and by October they'll be that deep red again. I keep that promise every day. June made sure I could. I still think about that Sunday evening on the back porch. June with her sweet tea, the light going gold across the yard she'd spent 30 years making beautiful. And that quiet in her voice that meant she'd already made up her mind. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She just saw clearly what I couldn't bring myself to see. That love without structure is just hope. And hope alone doesn't protect anyone. People talk about karma like it's something that happens to you from the outside. Like the universe keeps a ledger and eventually sends you a bill. I don't think it works like that. I think what June understood, deeply and practically, is that consequences follow choices the way roots follow water. Preston didn't lose control of that trust because the world punished him. He lost it because he made a series of choices, small ones at first, then larger ones, that revealed who he was becoming, and June had the wisdom to build something that would make those consequences unavoidable. Not out of cruelty, but out of love for both of us. That's what I keep coming back to, the wisdom of it. She didn't do what I would have done, which was to hope for the best and feel hurt when the best didn't come. She sat down with an attorney and she thought it through. She asked hard questions about human nature, about her own son's human nature, and she built something that could hold the weight of the answer. That takes a kind of clear-eyed intelligence that most people spend their whole lives avoiding, because it means admitting that the people you love are capable of letting you down. And then there's Preston. I've thought a lot about what it took for him to ring that doorbell instead of using his key. That was the moment I knew something real had shifted in him. A man who is only sorry about getting caught doesn't ring the doorbell. He uses his key and acts like nothing happened. Preston rang the doorbell because some part of him understood that he'd forfeited the right to walk in freely, and owning that, sitting with that, required something from him that Lacey and Chris with the clean shoes couldn't give him. It required backbone. The willingness to stay in the room with your own shame and not run from it. I'm not a man who gives speeches. June was the one with words. But if I could say one thing to anyone watching this, especially if you're my age, especially if you've spent your life building something and you're starting to wonder what happens to it when you're gone, it's this. The most important structures you build aren't made of wood or money. They're made of character. Your own, the kind you quietly cultivate in the people around you. June cultivated mine for 41 years. She was still doing it from beyond that reading of her will. I keep the maples. I keep the house. I keep showing up for my son on Sundays because showing up is what good fathers do even when it's hard. That's not weakness. That's the whole point.